Turn that heat off. Hey, greetings from Alaska. Thanks for joining me. What I wanted to what I wanted to share with you today, before I get to that, I recorded with Sibylla Irwin, Sketching Encounters. She does a great job. She's going to be, I think, done with what we did this coming Friday or something like that. Also, a week from tomorrow, I'll be on with D.A. Roberts on his Ex Machina YouTube channel. Again, I'll have links for those coming videos or whatever. But anyway, so what I wanted to share with you today comes from, we'll name her Kelly. She's from a village. The village is in the Bristol Bay area. And with relatives and whatnot, she ended up going up the Wood River with some relatives and then on up the Agula Walk, and they ended up between Lake Circa and Lake Beverly. Now, this particular area, I tried to pinpoint it on the map with her. She wasn't too sure because this happened back in the early 60s. So with that, it is, I'm going by her best description as far as what you'll see on the map. So her and an aunt and uncle and her cousin, we'll name him Charlie. He's since passed. Again, this was back in the early 60s, right? So they were, while her aunt and uncle and stuff were down at the skiff and they were going to munyuk on the beach and they were going to, basically have a picnic there. They were getting everything ready. And her aunt asked them to go see if they saw any berries, right? Is there any, worthwhile berries to pick over this way or whatever? Just conversation, basically. Kelly at the time, she was about 14 years old, right? So she was like, okay, we'll go and look. And her cousin Charlie was a couple years older than her. Well, Charlie's dad, her uncle, sent him with a .357 little 4-inch barrel revolver in his pocket in case they came across bears, which in that area they're very, very common. You got multiple salmon streams, millions of fish, they're everywhere. So they take off. And they knew they had, at least 4 hours before anything was ready to eat or whatever, because her aunt and uncle told them so. So, hey, go check out the trails, keep safe, whatever. They go on about their way, and they make their way up this little finger. And from how she explained it to me, because she was only there the one time, and, it's several years ago. So, the experience is vivid, but the exact location is a little off. So with that, just, keep that in mind. So they make their way up this ridge, basically. And where they're going up, the mountains there, they're not overly high. You know what I mean? They're not like thousands and thousands of feet. It's a Wood River range. So anyway, so they're going up this ridge off a game trail that's about 20 feet below roughly 20-25 feet below the actual top of the ridge, with sloping about 45 degrees, right? So they get back up in there. They look around at a couple places once they got right around tree line, and it opened up a little bit. There wasn't a whole lot of berries, and they were walking along having a good old time. Well, as they got to a certain point and realized there's really nothing here, we need to look for a different location, they turned around and started heading back down. So they come up on a little bit of a rise, and the trail starts to lead back downhill, right? So from what she was saying, her cousin Charlie was in front of her, and the few blackberries that he found, he's throwing up in the air as they're walking for them to fall on her, just goofing off. And, she said he was always real playful and just liked to joke around. So he's throwing these berries, and she's saying, stop, all that kind of stuff. Just being kids, basically, young teenagers. So as they're going along, the wind is blowing towards them, but it's coming over the ridge above them. So it's kind of swirling around them, and it's not hitting them directly. But a couple times during this wind swirling around them, they caught a whiff of something real foul, which immediately stopped her cousin Charlie, who was just in front of her a couple paces, from joking and jovial to all of a sudden dead quiet, and put his hand up to like stop. And so he's looking up the ridge, because that's the direction the wind's blowing. So he's looking and not seeing anything, right? And so he kind of squats down and does this number with his hand, telling her to squat down too. And they're looking, because that smell triggered something within him, and she didn't realize at the time. And so she's whispering, what do we stop for? What do we stop for? And he goes, did you smell that? And she said, yeah, I smelled it. Is that a bear? Now, she had been around bears but never really smelled one, so she was going off of what her cousin said, and her cousin was like, no, it's not a bear, and didn't give any explanation, just said it's not a bear, and he had that pistol out, right? And so seeing him go from jovial and joking to pistol out, it immediately, like, it took it to that other level of, this is no longer in a fun situation. Something's off, right? So from what she said, this wind kept blowing, not overly hard, but enough, if they were up on the ridge, it would be blowing pretty good, but it was blowing over and kind of swirling around them. Now they're on the trail coming down. They're on a slope coming down. Off to their left is thick vegetation, and they're just right at the tree line, just below this ridge, kind of like where just to their right is tree line's done. There's a couple scrub brushes, but the rest is just uphill. As they're going, she, as she's trying to ask him questions about what are we doing, he's looking off to his right. If straight down the trail was 12 o'clock, he would be at the 2 o'clock position, looking up the ridge in this direction. And she's like, what are you looking at? Because she's trying to see what he's seeing, and he points, and so she looks, and gets the direction proper, and she sees what he sees, which is this dark shape, just a rounded dark shape up at the top of the ridge, which is 25 feet in elevation, but in distance at the angle, you're talking maybe 40 yards, 45 yards, something like that. So she sees it, and so he's saying, just be quiet, the wind's blowing in our face, so they haven't winded us. And she's totally oblivious to, what do you mean they? Who? She wanted to ask who's they, but respecting her cousin, he's the one in charge of keeping her safe, she shut up and stayed quiet. They're both looking at this little rounded dark spot that didn't match any of the other terrain, and it disappears. It just drops out of view. So they're sitting there for a minute, and she's asking him what's going on. Now, she has heard hairy man stories, chalked it up to, that those are good stories. Because she had heard other people, but at that age, she just chalked it up to someone trying to outdo someone else's story kind of thing, and didn't really realize the significance or the reality of it. And so he's like, look, it's not funny, because she was kind of giggling, like, this is silly. What are we doing? He said, it's a hairy man. And so, not knowing any better, she starts kind of mockingly saying, oh, the hairy man. He goes, look, not a joke, be quiet. So with the wind blowing some more, all of a sudden it gets like still in the air. Even though the wind's blowing, she said she couldn't really hear the wind anymore. It was like the being in the eye of the storm kind of feeling. And that's the best description she had of it. Well, as this is going on, about half the distance between where this thing was last seen and where their position was on this trail, a woodland caribou comes over the rise, over the ridge, and its back leg is stiff, pointing backwards, kind of half dragging it like it had been dislocated or something, and this caribou is going straight down. Cuts like half the distance between where they last seen this thing coming down the hill, and as soon as it dropped down into the trees below them, her cousin looks back at her and Charlie says, they must be hunting, right? And so everything's becoming real to her at this point, because okay, he said he saw a hairy man, which it's whatever. I saw it too, but she didn't see the hairy man. She just saw a dark little lump, right? And then with the caribou coming through injured, and him saying that, it's really she's getting the realization of like, holy crap. So he says, stay quiet, back up, start backing up, and so she was like, okay. So she stands up, turns around and starts walking up the trail, and he basically almost tackled her and said, stay low and keep going that direction, but don't, just keep going. I'll keep an eye out, but don't stand up all the way, stay low to the ground. And he gave no explanation, so she was just doing as she was told. So they go back uphill a little ways. So they basically doubled the distance from where they were when they initially saw the little dark lump and, whatnot. They doubled the distance further back. So now where they're standing, it's a little tighter in the brush. There's scrub brush on their right and more brush on their left. And it's basically, you got to understand, it's not like all tree lines have an exact straight line across. They ebb and flow, as far as elevation and whatnot, right? And so where they happened to back up to, there was more brush behind them. And so her cousin felt a little safer with some quasi cover, if that makes sense. And he's looking, and she's like, let's just go. That was her reasoning, was let's just go. Let's just take the trail. We'll be back down to the beach in no time. Let's just go. And he was like, we can't. Hold on. Now, he's recognizing something she isn't. He's recognizing there's a hunt going on, and he doesn't want to get into the middle of that hunt. So he gingerly explains, look, explains they're hunting, that caribou's injured. They're gonna want to go after it, because they could hear the caribou. It didn't go too much further down the hill and was kind of working its way through the brush. It was easy to hear, right? So as he's explaining this, the dark shape reappears, but this time you could see shoulders and the head, and it was obvious it was very, very large. So he says, see, I told you, just stay still, stay quiet. We'll let them pass, and when they're doing their thing, then we'll go. And because they had the only direction they could go for as far as safety is back the way they came, which now they're cut off, right? So she was saying it was really odd being in a position to where she had no control over anything. You know what I mean? Like anyone would feel just unsettled by that, let alone this thing standing up there. So she said once it showed itself again and you could see the shoulders and the head, it was facing them. It was looking right at them from that distance, which is less than 100 yards. It's looking at them and just kind of assessing them, she said. It didn't move or anything like that. She could just feel its eyes on them, which is a creepy feeling in itself. Jeez. So they sit there a moment, and this thing slowly goes out of view, right? So they're sitting there quiet, and he was like, I want to go. I want us to run, but I don't know what they're doing. I don't want to start running and then be intercepted as they're going after this caribou. So they're sitting there facing this direction. Now, behind them is a lot more brush. Yeah, it's a brushier spot of the trail. There's more vegetation on their right versus where they just were, where it was more open and just some scrub brush. where they're at, they're basically backed up to where they're surrounded by brush, and they're kind of sitting with the open field of view right inside the line of brush on the trail. She said as they were discussing running forward or whatever, they got a real heavy, rank smell. Like this smell was just right on top of them. And again, he's still holding the pistol. There's still the caribou making noise off to their left. This wind is blowing, and now they got this pungent smell right on top of them. She said she started looking around and didn't see anything, but she's looking from a squatted down position at eye level. She's just looking level around. Her cousin turns around, looks past her, up, behind her, up in the brush. This thing was standing over them. She couldn't remember how. She said it was just very, very big, very, very big. So as they were focused on what was going on over here, one of these beings came behind them and was standing about 10 feet behind them in the brush, looking down at them. She said all bets were off. I'm not laughing. She kind of giggled because her reaction was one of, I'm gone. You can tell me don't run. You can tell me whatever you want. But she was gone. Started hauling ass. Knocked Charlie over. Charlie's yelling, don't run, don't run, don't run. He gets up. He starts running after her, right? They get to about where they were before when Charlie first squatted down, and they're seeing this little dark spot and got the funky smell. At that point, she was overcome with emotion. She said she was so freaked out. She just crumpled down crying, was like covering her ears, and was inconsolable crying. She was so freaked out. Because just of what's going on. She felt like it was surreal. It was too much in the moment, and she was too young to understand anything, like that heavy. And so at this point, Charlie's there, and he's standing over her, and he's pointing the gun back behind them where they just ran from. And he goes, look, you need to get up. It's not chasing us. We need to get up. Just walk calmly, walk calmly. We got to go. And so she's sobbing, half hunched over, and he's kind of guiding her by her arm because she said the tears were just pouring. She had snot coming out the nose. It was bad, all bad, as far as her emotional state. She said she must have stumbled maybe 10, 15 steps and collapsed again, just overcome by just emotion, right? And again, Charlie's trying to console her and yet encourage her to keep moving on. She said at that point, she felt the ground, thump, 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 footsteps. And immediately, as soon as she felt it in the ground, because she was hunched down, her hands and knees were on the ground and she was sobbing. When she felt that, all tears stopped. She was immediately upright and she started hauling ass down the trail. I asked her, I was like, was it just the feeling of the ground moving? And she said that once she felt the ground shake from this thing's weight on the trail behind them, it had to have been close enough that it was just like the jackrabbit fight or flight response. It was flight. And she took off down that trail. She said there was portions of the trail that dropped about 3 to 4 feet, because you're going up rocks and dirt and stuff, and so the trail isn't even. It's not just a well-groomed path. You know what I mean? The trail ebbs and flows and kind of goes back and forth and drops here and goes up here and that kind of thing, right? So she's literally leaping down these places. A couple times she had to tumble over, jump back up, and continue running. And I asked her, I was like, did you stop to think about your cousin? Did you stop to try to figure out, are we safe yet? She said, nope. Everything in her said, go, 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 go. And that's what she did. Now, she comes running back down to the beach. She says she doesn't remember exactly how long it took because she had tears streaming down her face. She was just hauling. She was all scratched up from tumbling, jumping up, running through brush, all that stuff, right? She heard Charlie yelling for her to stop a couple times because Charlie was concerned she was going to get out of sight and potentially get snatched up. She learns this later. So she makes it all the way back down to where her aunt and uncle are on the beach, and they hear her. Unbeknownst to her, she didn't realize she was screaming and wailing all the way down. Charlie verified that. Her aunt and uncle verified it when she came back down. They heard her wailing and screaming, hauling ass, right? But in her mind's eye, she was just running. She didn't realize all this stuff was going on. She didn't realize she was screaming and all that stuff. So her uncle immediately has his rifle and is coming up the trail to meet her. She blows past him, right? She gets to her aunt and just basically tackles her aunt, looking for comfort, right? And her aunt was sitting on a log in front of a fire tending to a meal, and here she comes and just tackles her aunt to the ground. And so her aunt's calming her down, telling her to calm down. And her uncle's asking, "Where's Charlie? Where's Charlie?" And off in the distance, you can hear Charlie screaming. So her uncle assumes he's being attacked or something's happening, a bear. He's thinking bear, right? So he takes off up the trail. And from what her uncle and Charlie said later, his uncle went about maybe 100 yards, because the initial part of the trail is through some pretty thick brush and all that stuff. And once he cleared that and the trail opened up a little more, he saw Charlie, and Charlie's facing uphill pointing his gun. And as Charlie's doing that, his dad comes up beside him and says, "Where's the bear? Where's the bear?" He says, "It's not a bear. It's a hairy man." And so immediately his dad's like, "Put the gun down, go head back down the trail. I'll keep an eye out," or whatever. So Charlie does so. He puts the gun, stops pointing in that direction, still holding it, turns around and goes back down the trail, going back to where they were basically going to have this picnic. His dad stayed there for a couple moments looking for any sign. There was no noise, no nothing. So he gingerly backs up, turns around, and goes back down the trail. So when they get back to next to the fire, Kelly's calmed down a little bit at this point, still sobbing. And her auntie's rocking her, telling her calm down, it's going to be okay. And in this state, she's a little freaked out still, a lot freaked out. But she clearly hears what her cousin Charlie's saying, and that is, at the point of the thump, thump, thump sound and her taking off, he watched this thing come out of the brush about 5-6 steps towards them, and it was intentionally hopping, making this a bigger impact on the ground, right? But she didn't see that. She was on all fours, sobbing like crazy. And Charlie said he was shocked how quickly she ran, because he was focused on this thing, pointing a gun at it, and it's doing this weird, thump, thump, thump. And all of a sudden, she's up and gone. Before he can even react to it, she was just gone down the trail. And Charlie said he backed away from this thing because it stopped moving. As soon as she took off running, this thing stopped. All forward movement, was just standing there. He never described what it looked like. All he described was a hairy man. So because I asked, what did it look like? And, she had no, other than it was big and dark and it was shaped like a man, right? So Charlie said once it stopped, he started backing down. And once he got to a certain point, it turned away and walked off. And then he heard it go down off to his right at this point, because he's facing up the trail, down to where the caribou was still making noise down in the brush. It was making weird calls down in there. So he figured, okay, it was pushing us away from its hunt and it's continuing on. So I'm gonna get out of here. But he said as he was coming back down the trail, hollering for her, she's wailing and howling. He can easily hear she's down the trail. You know what I mean? Because she was really, really screaming. He said every 15, 20 feet, he was looking around and nothing. He would point the gun because he just felt uneasy. But once he reached the point to where his dad came through the brush and got his attention, he felt relieved. And once they got back down to the beach, basically they took their lunch to go. They put the fire out. They packed up what little things they had pulled out from there, and they left. I want to thank Kelly for sharing that, because she was encouraged to do so by another subscriber of the channel, and I appreciate those people that know of their elders who have had experiences. Again, this happened in the early 60s. I appreciate those people reaching out to those elders and encouraging them to get these stories shared, anonymously or not. I don't care. It's all about the information that these encounters contain. There's things to be taken away from it, things to be learned as far as these things, behaviors when the encounter's happening, whereas owl hoots, strange smells, things being thrown, on and on and on. There's a whole list of stuff you can learn from these encounters to better make you safe, especially when there's weird stuff going on that you don't know what that weird sound is. And grant you, bobcats make weird noises, porcupines mating is a horrific sound. It doesn't sound like mating, that's for sure. It sounds like murder. And injured hares, all that kind of stuff. So all these animals in the wild have these weird noises, and it take half a lifetime to really get to know these noises. First of all, you have to be around the animal enough to understand their behavior. Not all of us are nature biologists. We're not out in the field studying bobcats and their noises or sound of a lynx screaming or whatever. Not everyone has that information, so just keep that in mind as well. Anyway, I'm babbling. I want to thank her for sharing. Rest in peace, Charlie. And let's see, was there anything else? I don't remember anything offhand, but thank you guys for joining me, and we will catch you guys soon.